Hey everyone, I'm Primal. I'm 44 and I live in Northern England, and I've always been drawn to the paranormal and the unexplained. It's always fascinated me for as long as I can remember. The stories, the encounters, the things we can't quite understand. So I decided to bring them to life through voice. So if you're like me and you love the unknown, the paranormal, the supernatural, you're in the right place. And I won't do this kind of intro on every video, it's just this first one to introduce myself. I am brand new at this and I really hope you like it. Thank you. My grandfather died in 1995 due to emphysema and other health concerns. He was in his early 60s and left us prematurely, as he had many people who loved and depended on him, including many young grandchildren. I was only 4 years old, almost 5 at the time, when he passed. And I don't remember much from this darker time in my life, but I remember his funeral extremely vividly. I was in a funeral home that has multiple parlours and many hallways throughout the building. I remember being outside of his parlour and seeing him across the room. We locked eyes. I walked over to him. After all, he was my grandpa, and I did not realise at the time that he had passed on. We began our usual, as we were two peas in a pod and had a special relationship. We held hands and walked through the halls. Much of the conversation I do not recall, but I do remember showing him the lounge area, as that was my favourite place to be, what with all the snacks and the vending machines. As we approached the area that we had met at, we stopped, and he said to me, "Michael, I have to go now." He had vanished, literally leaving my hand empty in the air. I can still see my empty hand and remember the shock and confusion. The part that helps me to think this was an authentic experience, and this is something my grandmother, my aunt and my mother remember well and were concerned for years about. As I approach the open casket, my mother picks me up. I see my grandpa Leroy there, in his peace, and I begin, confused, to relentlessly ask why grandpa was in a casket and what is wrong with him. My mother told me, crying, and I remember this clearly, "Michael, honey, he is dead. He is gone and not coming back." I was in disbelief, arguing, No, I just saw him. He's outside." After this, I remember us all crying together, but that is all. I never spoke about it until I was about 12 or 13 years old. I was at my grandmother's, and her health was wavering at the time. I'd been thinking about it a lot with her, being in that state and having memories of my experience. And I finally broke down and told them what I had remembered. Again, we cried, and they didn't believe that I could remember that, or that I'd held on to it through all these years of childhood. Well, they, in a way, directly corroborate my experience for me, at least solidifying it in my head as a final goodbye from one of my favourite human beings. As I remember the scene at the casket, and they were always too afraid to ask me about it, maybe to protect me from emotional anguish. My grandmother, for the remaining year or so that she was with us, would ask me to tell her the story any time I would visit her. She always claims to have woken up one day feeling my grandfather laying next to her. She said she could feel it was him, as if she went to bed next to him and woke up together. And she never told anyone that until I shared this story with you. My boyfriend of 5 years had crushed on me for probably 12 or 13 years. He was 2 grades below me and was a bad boy, while I was popular and in all honours college level classes, so I wasn't aware he existed until I met him at my dad's business about 7 years ago. He apparently talked about me being his dream girl and was teased that it would never happen, which is why I mention it. So in 2009, he and his best friend, I'll call him Josh, were getting into pills due to Josh's grandfather being an amputee and unable to properly attend or understand, hiding the medications, thus leaving large amounts of methadone, clonopapine, hydrocone and such lying around. This was before the opiate crisis that has affected my generation deeply in the last 15 years. 2 days before Christmas 2009, Josh overdosed in the bedroom that my boyfriend is currently staying in. It's a long story, but we moved back to our respective families because we were laid off during the pandemic and we were in a bad wreck, losing the extra car. The room has never felt spooky, never anything strange about it, but I've had a few pranks pulled on me that we believe Josh does to basically congratulate my boyfriend on being with the woman he waited for. I've woken up to sticky notes completely covering my body, my drinks poured on the floor, and random objects move right where I exit the bed so that I can step on them first thing in the morning. I swear I've heard giggling. Each time I've angrily asked my boyfriend if he was messing with me, and I'm aware when he's lying. He always says no. We like to think that this is Josh playing practical jokes, something he was known for. But this is nothing compared to what Josh did for me in 2017. It wasn't a prank, it saved my life. 4 years ago, I went into an anaphylactic shock. I lost all my ability to speak or move my lower body. I was upstairs with a curved and steep staircase separating me from my phone. I remember crawling to the stairs, knowing it could be fatal if I smashed into the wall that the stairs led to before the turn with a very large, steep steps. I know that I was extremely oxygen deprived, but I immediately saw Josh and two of my deceased best friends ascend the stairs and carry me to the living room couch with my nebulizer and cell phone. I called 911, but I had no voice. My friends were gone except Josh. He told me he was going to wake my boyfriend from the hammock in the back of my yard. And suddenly, my boyfriend dreamed of his friend saying that I was in trouble. My boyfriend came running into the house. By this point, I was dying. I no longer could use any part of my body. No air came into my lungs when I inhaled. I remember thinking of my daughter and praying that her father would navigate my loss to her and keep memories of me alive. He actually died in a freak accident 8 months ago, so now I'm fulfilling that for him, but I digress. I struggled to remain conscious, but I was fading. My boyfriend saw the 911 operator on the phone in my sweaty, blue body. He told them he didn't think I was breathing. And by some absolute miracle, there was an ambulance passing by my neighbourhood. The hospital and dispatch were 30 minutes away. This coincidence, plus my boyfriend's sudden premonition that I was hurt, saved my life. Josh and those EMTs saved my life. I remember the EMT asking my boyfriend if I had overdosed. I hadn't, and I thought of how Josh had died. I was blabbering on about dead people saving me after a large amount of epinephrine, and no wonder they thought I was high. The doctors and EMT were baffled at how I managed to get down those stairs, or even stay alive long enough to get help. I had one bruise on my leg that was tiny, that was it, and the worst headache I've ever had. Turns out I'm allergic to the latex in spray paint. I just told them I slid down the stairs, but it's not how I remember it. The weird thing is, I'd never met Josh when he was alive. I don't know how I recognised him or elucidated him, but he looked exactly like the picture I was shown. I had a lot of paranormal encounters, but my running with Josh saved my life, and he never even knew me. So thanks, Josh, for giving me one more time on this earth, and I wish we had met many years before. I do hope he is resting peacefully, just every now and again popping in to check in on us. I used to work at Windsor Castle, specifically in the Royal Library, in the late 1980s until I left in 2003 after my third child was born. I wanted to stay home with my kids, and honestly, after everything I experienced there, I was kind of ready to be done. I wasn't anyone important, just a junior library assistant. Basically, I helped with cataloguing, pulling materials, handling rare books, and that sort of thing. The Royal Library isn't open to the public, and everything in there is strictly protected and preserved. We worked in quiet rooms with controlled temperature and lighting, and had to follow a lot of rules. But here's the thing, Windsor is haunted as hell, like truly, and I didn't believe in that kind of thing when I started. The first thing I saw was Queen Elizabeth I. Yes, really. It was around 1992 and I was working late in one of the archive rooms, just shelving. I turned around and saw a woman in an elaborate old gown, stiff white collar, red hair just standing in the doorway. She didn't say anything, didn't move. I thought I was going mad. She looked too real to be a hallucination. Then she walked backwards into the wall and just disappeared. I will never forget that image. It was the most bizarre, unnatural thing I've ever seen. There's a black dog that shows up around the west side of the library also. No one talks about it officially, but we all knew. I saw it twice. It just appears, trots by and vanishes when you turn to look at it properly. Someone once told me it's connected to a prince who died in childhood, but who knows? All I know is that it gave me chills every time. Other weird stuff, there's footsteps above you and no one's upstairs. Pages turning in a book no one is touching. Cold spots even in temperature controlled rooms. Whispers in Latin or French when no one's around. A man in old fashioned clothes staring from a locked archive room. The room was empty when we unlocked it. It wasn't constant, but it happened enough that I stopped questioning it. I've never talked about this publicly before, and honestly, I'm a bit nervous even typing this out. We were always told to be discreet, and working in any royal residence comes with a sense of don't ask, don't tell. But when it comes to that kind of thing, after 20 plus years, I just wanted to share it somewhere with people who might get it. I haven't been back since I left. I don't think I want to. My wife and I moved into our old house in New England in summer of 2000. We had looked at dozens of houses, but this one just immediately felt like home. Soon after, we invited our good friend James and his husband up for a weekend. Keep James and his husband in mind. We were pretty well into getting our late night party on, playing cards, drinking, smoking in the dining room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw, though the experience was more perceived, very vividly, an older woman with jet black hair, sitting next to the old upright piano in the corner. The piano came with the house. We specifically requested that the previous owner include it in the sale because it was so cool, and we didn't have much furniture. It wasn't even slightly scary. In fact, it was just like she was hanging out. I mentioned it to everyone and we laughed it off. Drinking and fun continued through the night. I was never really a ghost believer. I'm still a skeptic 100%, but the rest of this story makes me really wonder. Several weeks later, we met a neighbour from down the street who lived in the neighbourhood for 45 years. You live in the Muriel King house, she tells us. Muriel was a really interesting lady. She was a famous fashion designer in the 1930s. Please Google her. She lived there alone after her husband committed suicide. Very tragic. She was a very interesting lady. Very independent and ahead of her time. She travelled all over the world. She was Greek, I think. Greek? I asked. Weird question, but did she have black hair? Yeah, she had jet black hair even when she was an old woman. It was very striking. Yep, I got the chills right then. Many weeks later, I met another neighbour from down the street that had lived there for 60 plus years. And he starts telling me about Muriel. She was a famous fashion designer. She designed gowns for Rita Hayworth and all the classic film stars. She designed costumes for Broadway plays too. Her parties were legendary, he tells me. She used to have all her gay boyfriends from Broadway come up on the train and they'd drink and sing show tunes at the piano in the dining room all night long. Yep. Now this all could be coincidental, but it just seems too much so. But she must have been an awesome woman. People from around town have given her some of her original drawings and even an unfinished dress she was working on. There haven't been any more Muriel sightings, but shortly after my wife got pregnant, which was 20 years ago, we both woke up out of a cold sleep at the same time and looked at each other like, what the F? And then our bedroom door slammed hard. We like to think that Muriel wasn't a fan of kids. She never had any of her own, so she was like, later y'all, I'm out of here. I was a sergeant in the US Army, and I was getting out from the military when President Bush ordered more troops into Iraq in 2003. I had just returned home to Austin, Texas, when I was summoned into my local National Guard unit at Camp Mabry. and told that I was being recalled to the army, but the unit was already tasked out to deploy to Iraq. I was not part of their unit yet, so the commander offered to give me a waiver to deploy with a government contractor, Halliburton, in Houston. I knew that I would make more money as a contractor, so I took the offer. Not long after arriving in Kuwait at Camp Doha, I began working with the operations team, overseeing logistics affairs. We would oversee the daily convoy of supply between Kuwait and Baghdad, a route that was riddled with IED incidents, small arms skirmishes, and almost constant breakdowns of army and civilian vehicles. Because I was a saw gunner in the 1st Infantry Division while in active duty, I was technically still in the guard. I was often in the convoys manning a mounted weapon that accompanied the mostly civilian convoys. During these runs, we had a few strange encounters in an area south of Baghdad, known then as Camp Babylon. Occupied by French troops, but then designated an archaeological site for obvious reasons, Camp Babylon was set up in the area that was said to originally be inhabited by the famous Tower of Babel. Indeed, there were ruins there that did look like a massive structure once stood at that spot. I had 2 strange incidents happen to me while passing through there. The first incident seemed a bit benign, but sets the mood for the second. We were passing through Camp Babylon in the afternoon one day when our convoy took small arms fire. The SOP at the time, which means standard operating procedure, was to stop the convoy and return fire. This was because in the past such incidents ended up being a lone gunman attempting to scare the convoy into running into IEDs on the road. Because of this, the SOP changed to stop the convoy, dismount and return fire. While engineers looked for explosive devices on the road, we scanned the horizon for enemy. Nothing. They most likely fled immediately. However, the ruins around Camp Babylon were alive with shadow figures that seemed to move about the area. Several times we would spot the figures, but they would immediately disappear. A contractor, lying beside me with his weapon, commented, "How odd that we're in the shadow of Babel and fighting the supernatural." I didn't respond, but I knew he was a 32nd degree Mason who was really into the arcane aspects of Babylon, etc. I didn't feel at the time that much was supernatural, but certainly did see the shadow, and bizarrely, mostly small figures dart about the structures. Once the road was deemed clear, we continued on to Baghdad. Now, the second incident occurred about a month later, and at this point, the weather in southern Iraq and Kuwait had turned quite cold at night. During this encounter, we had just completed the supply run to Baghdad, and were returning back to Camp Doha in Kuwait when a vehicle in our convoy broke down. Now, once again, we found ourselves right at Camp Babylon. While the army mechanics took a look at the vehicle, and the rest of us took up fighting positions around the area, strange things began to happen again. It started with a strange light bobbing in the desert. Thinking it was a person with a flashlight, we used NVGs, which are night vision goggles, to watch. It was simply a glowing ball of light moving towards a set of ruins. After initial contact with the light, a few of us had moved forward, away from the convoy, to see what the source was. After seeing it was self-contained and not a person, we were a bit alarmed. Then we heard a sound that I will never forget. A long wailing began from one of the ruined structures not far away. It sounded like a woman in agony mixed with loneliness. On and on the sounds went while we huddled in the cold and dark, wondering what the hell we were listening to. And with our NVGs equipped, we used our flashlights to spot the ruins. If you've ever done this, you will know that a normal flashlight with NVGs looks like a massive beam of light. We scoured the area, but no source of the wails or the ball of light was seen. A About this time we were told via radio that the vehicle was repaired and ready to roll, so we decided to return to the convoy. I was slinging my saw over my shoulder when I noticed my contractor partner was staring at the ruins in horror. He was frozen. I shook him and he snapped out of his stupor, quickly leaving the area with the rest of us. Once we were back at the camp and it was pleasantly daylight the following morning, several of us were chatting about the encounter at Camp Babylon before our daily operations briefing. It was then that I remembered the terrified expression on the face of the contractor, so I asked him about it. He was still obviously traumatised by the event, but he managed to explain that as we were leaving our positions on the sandy hill, he saw a tall, black figure standing beside the ruins. The figure was just watching us as we were looking for him, her or it. He said that he felt an instant wave of despair hit him and thought that he was going to die. He didn't remember leaving the area. His next memory was in the Humvee headed back to Q8. Thank you guys for listening. This is my first video, and I know it's probably not the best and the most polished, but I will learn, I will get better at it, so I really appreciate you if you stay to the end here. Please comment, like and subscribe. I don't like saying all that and I probably won't say it again. But yeah, thank you very much. See you on the next one.